Welcome to our podcast From the Ground Up, where we interview startup founders exploring their journeys, their successes, challenges, and lessons learned. We hope you be inspired in discovering what it takes to build a thriving startup. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, and here with us today we have Adam, the co-founder and CEO of Stateful. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Stoked to be here.
Great. So a little bit about Adam. Adam has been working with developer tools and open source since 2006, including Sauce Labs and Buoyant/Linkerd. He loves being a dad, noodling on guitar, traveling, and building game-changing technology companies like Stateful. Adam, you've done a lot. We've done some research on you. But before we really dive into your company and what you're all about, give us a little background of where your life started. Where are you from originally?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a cool little town called Bellingham, Washington, not far from the Canadian border, north of Seattle, and went to school across the state in the wheat fields and in the Palouse at Washington State, and studied computer science and business there, and then made my way to San Francisco 2 days after graduation to start this whole crazy adventure.
Yeah, that's great. It's a crazy venture for a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of individuals that are in computer science. What kind of a kid were you growing up that eventually led you to have interest in computer science?
Yeah. So let's see. My grandfather started a company called Marshall Industries, and pretty early on, I think he donated a computer to the household, and I grew up with smart, well-educated people who were pretty up on things with technology, and so I was around that kind of stuff, and I was a pretty curious guy, a little bit mischievous, and building computers, doing sports. My stepfather wound up installing multiple versions of software to try to keep me out of things on the computers in the house, and at some point in high school, I wound up in a newspaper for building a web portal for helping people like coordinate finding lost and found pets, and that wound up as part of my college application, which is fun. So technology has always been a theme.
Wow, that's great. I didn't know that. Um, Transparently, we did a little research just in general on you and tried to get a little background aside from what you see online on LinkedIn and other areas. So I'm just going to kind of walk through some of this information. It may be accurate, maybe not. But it says Adam Christian is a prominent figure in software engineering known for his significant contributions at Sauce Labs, where he served as vice president of engineering for 5 years. While there, he, prior to his tenure at Sauce Labs, was the co-creator of Windmill Test Framework and worked on the Mosmill testing tool with Mozilla. For those that don't know about Sauce Labs, they're best known for their expertise in providing cloud-based automated testing for mobile and web applications. Looks like a lot of your development tooling experience, at least early on, was somewhat around testing and applications. Was that something that you were passionate about, got led into? What was your experience like and interest diving into that area of technology?
Yeah. Like I said, I left college and I drove to San Francisco and parked my car across the street on Howard Street from the Open Source Applications Foundation, which was building something called Chandler, which was supposed to be sort of an open source replacement for Microsoft Outlook. And I was working with a good friend named Michael Rogers, and the team that we were on was actually QA engineering. And they just, sort of realized that there was a big hole in building that application, and that, we started writing Python scripts and automating that thing. And that turned into a framework. He went to work at Mozilla. We took a lot of ideas for that and morphed it into something that could be used with testing Firefox extensions. And that was an open source project. And so basically the first sort of, significant thing that I was focused on caring about in my time in the Bay Area was test automation. So in between there, I went to work for a company called Slide, doing test automation stuff for them, and then some web development, and then the Sauce Labs experience sort of became a possibility. I met the CEO, John Dunham, there, who's become an incredible mentor for me. But that really felt like where I should be, at that time, and it goes on from there. It's definitely a theme.
Yeah. It's interesting. Testing, if you really think about it, is really important to anything that we use today, whether it's a TV or a radio or the internet or a computer, whatever application you're using. If it's not tested, it doesn't function. If it doesn't function, you don't use it, and ultimately you're an unhappy user. So I understand testing. We actually provided a testing service, 10 years ago. And it was fascinating how much of a demand there was then and still is today, whether it's browsers or mobile or, crypto or all sorts of different areas, that it's really important to make sure that things function. So a huge value there. And sounds like you are very much in the middle of a lot of innovation, which is great. I want to switch gears a little bit to your company today. Before we do that, is Stateful your first startup? Kind of walk us through the evolution of building up until where you're at now.
Yeah. The Sauce Labs experience was a significant part of my career. That was both, from a technology perspective, as we were, figuring out how to bring all these ideas to mobile stuff and open source communities. I spent a little time in Germany in between there, and worked at a company called Bettable for a while, and wound up after Germany working at Buoyant, which was a really cool company. They make a service mesh software for Kubernetes called Linkerd, and Kubernetes has seen a ton of growth and community excitement, and during that time, a good friend of mine, my co-founder now, Sebastian Tika, he was dabbling in crypto and dabbling in other developer tooling things. And I was in Germany and he was here, and he wound up working at Small Step, which is my friend Mike's startup. And, as we were helping these other founders build these companies, we were learning all kinds of really cool stuff about, at this scale, how do you build things? How do you test it? How do you go after product market fit? What does marketing look like? Where does community building fit into this? And we just got itchier and itchier. The more progress we help these other startups make, the more we felt like, we have a lot of passion that came out of the Sauce Labs experience, and maybe it's time for us to do our own thing. And there were a lot of different possibilities around what that could be. And that's quite a journey. I'm happy to talk about a little or a lot of that.
I mean, there's a lot in there. What was it that you finally said, hey, I think I've found the right co-founders. I think this is the right time. And what was the idea that really sparked you diving in and saying, I think we can get this funded. I think we could build something pretty special here. Walk us through that, because it's really, before you start a company, you usually have the idea, then you have a thesis, you think you can raise capital, you go into the market, you start building. It might be totally different once you get down the road a little bit. What was that like for you, that journey?
Yeah. So, I think after all this time doing, developer tooling related stuff, both Sebastian and I had wound up in a place where we were managing and building teams. We were doing some, product management stuff. We were doing a lot of one-on-ones. And even though like home for us was developer tooling, we kind of got to a place where we're like, we're having a lot of the same discussions every week with the same people, right? Like, how are you feeling about your productivity? Do you feel like you're spending a lot of focus time, or you're really distracted? Does our meeting cadence work? Are you doing the right stuff with your, time management, and et cetera, et cetera. And we both had this problem, not problem, but we had this experience that we thought could potentially be turned into a company. At the same time, as managers, we were continuing to do some coding on the side. So we built something called Marquee, which is like, it's sort of a home screen for VS Code, the code editor. And that has this incredible ecosystem and plugin architecture. And so for fun, we were building that together and exploring that ecosystem, which is blown up, was blowing up and continues to blow up. And we put that in the marketplace, and a lot of people started to install it and give us feedback and get frustrated with it. And, we wound up getting, tens of thousands of installs of that, which sort of said to us, like, there's a really interesting distribution mechanism here. And so when we brought those two things together, we were like, okay, how do we help people be better, happier developers? And how can we use this VS Code marketplace distribution mechanism to do that? And we came up with this concept of Strava as for runners, but for software developers, where VS Code is your Apple Watch, right? And you get a dashboard and cool metrics and notifications and a feed and collaboration and yada yada. And we thought, let's go try to do this. And I wasn't sure if I was quite ready to do it. So we put together a slide deck, a pretend slide deck. Like, if we were going to do this, what would it look like? And we put the deck together, and we both got pretty excited about that conceptually. And so I sent it to a friend, Fred, who's at Fly Ventures in Berlin, which is an awesome firm. And I basically wasn't trying to pitch him. I said, like, what do you think about this like, how bad is this? Basically. And he said, I it's bad, but I think you guys gotta go for it. You've got a lot of context, and now is a great time to do this, and we're interested in participating. So iterate a little more and do a pitch, and we did that, and they decided to go for it. So that was the moment where we jumped, right? And I think that's a pretty uniquely awesome way for that to go.
I mean, one pitch and you iterate a little and you get funding. That's not the normal. I mean, we've talked to a lot of founders that, they've got a list of 2,000 companies they're going to pitch to. They, get to 200 before they finally decide, do I really have what it takes to do this? And, eventually they get there, but it's a full-time job, until you really get off the ground. So sounds like you had something really good. What was the thesis about what you were building that you started with, and where is it at today?
Yeah. The thesis was about flow, about this state of being when you're in deep work, in that it's really hard for your brain to be doing or paying attention to anything else while you're in deep work. And so that's sort of at odds with this concept of what you're doing and how much time you're spending, and being able to manage that well. And so we went and built that, and I thought it was really cool. But that's because I have really limited time to write code, and have for many years. So to be able to say, like, during these points of the day, that's when I am able to be the most productive, was really useful for me. But it also turns out that a lot of developers they feel like building software is more of an art form, and they don't want limitations. They almost don't want metrics about that deep flow state, with sort of undercurrents of Big Brother and stuff involved. And so we got people to use it and excited about it, but it didn't really get us to a place where we thought, okay, this is where we're going to build a venture-backed business on top of this. So we had to pivot, and we kind of sat down as a team, and we thought about building this whole big application with data pipelines and VS Code integrations and yada, 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 time series data, and all that. And we thought, what was hard about that, right? Like, when new people came onto the team, like, what was it that kept them from being able to contribute? And the concept sort of was, when you sit down at a repo, these days, it's sort of a veneer over a whole bunch of configuration and then a whole bunch of cloud infrastructure. And so we did some exploring, and I think our backgrounds in developer tools led us back to this place where we have sort of more depth and intuition. And we started working on a project, which is a command line parser for Markdown, called RDME, which is now the Runme project. It's an open source project that we're investing a lot in, and really cool things are happening there. And so we kind of wound up back in this place where we still want to help developers and operators be happier and more productive, but we're doing it more through a tool that, offers them the ability to get to a place where they can do work more repeatably and more effectively. And so that's where we are today is the open source projects out there, and we're building on that. And we're also building software as a service connected to it. That's my ramble.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's great. I love that ramble. When you talk about open source and you talk about projects, a lot of people think it's free work that's out there for others to collaborate and work to see what problems you can solve as a community together. What's the business model around bringing products into open source and then taking it and turning a profit, or turning it into something that people will pay for? Your investors certainly want to know, they're giving you money, what's going to be the return?
Yeah. So, I think the way that the experience that we had at Sauce Labs and also Linkerd at Buoyant is that you build a really actually open source licensed project, which Runme is. It's 3 repos I think that are open source, and the reason you do that is because first of all, trust, right? You want developers to be able to see what the thing actually does. The second thing is that, like, it's in building developer tooling, it's really important that you have a community of people who not only are bought in as consumers of this, but can also give you feedback. And a great way of getting feedback is this community, GitHub issues, people joining a Discord. Even if people aren't putting up PRs and doing the work, which obviously is the dream, you want them to be included in this project and the thing that it's trying to solve. And the problem that Runme is trying to solve is basically taking what used to be just flat markdown files, right, with text in them and commands, and turning them into sort of run books with a configurable user experience, right, and considerably more powerful because you can do pretty cool integrated things with it. And so we've been working hard on trying to build that community. And so to go back to your question, was like, where do you make money? Is that project always has to be something people can use for free and trust and contribute to. But there's a lot of things that a standalone piece of software can't solve, right? So then you introduce a cloud service, and you probably even give that away, right? But and we've done that, and it's optional, and it's integrated into the notebooks, but it allows you to push commands and their output into the cloud to debug around them, to do sharing with Slack, and a lot more cool stuff that we're working on there, like analytics. And the goal is that once we add that value on a day-to-day basis in somebody's development workflow, and then you add value-added features in the cloud that gets teams and other people involved, that then when they go try to take that to work at a big company, there's requirements in order for them to be able to use that thing that they're now dependent on, that they really enjoy using, due to the nature of an enterprise environment, right? So, auditing and security and different authentication things and compliance and all these things come into play. And you offer that stuff, and that's what costs money, because it's maybe it's hard. It's the least fun to build. But it also is the blocker from allowing those people to use that tool that they need to get their job done. And it's the company paying for it, probably. So we don't know exactly what enterprise product we're pitching. We're really hoping that the community helps us get there.
Got it. So you're in the middle building and evolving as we speak, really. That's really great. 30,000 foot level for the non-technical listeners. What's the problem it solves for a developer? If I'm an investor listening and I hear the value proposition, simplify it for the non-technical folks of what you're building that's going to help developers that are using your tool, your technology.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess maybe this doesn't make it any clearer, but I'm going to say it as a starting point from a really, really high level. So developers have an IDE, right? An integrated development environment. And sort of what we see is an opportunity for an integrated environment for operating repos, for operators. And the person that we're sort of focusing on, well, not sort of focusing on, we are focusing on, but it's a little bit blurry what that persona is your person who's leading the kind of operational effort with your code base, right? And so we call it we call them the ops lead. Sometimes they can be an SRE, but the most important point is this is a person who's responsible for making it so that the code that you can clone onto your computer that interfaces with all this cloud software and environment variables and things, this is the person you go to that helps you get to a place where you can do work, right? They're the operator. And there's a lot more of this all the time in our repos because everything is backed by so much cloud infrastructure. And this person right now writes a lot of scripts. They try to make experiences reasonably good by prompting people for things and having notes on where to go get those things. And when folks run those scripts, they copy paste the output to them on Slack. And we see it's a really great opportunity to have these super rich runbooks that you open up, you get this notebook experience, you click through the thing, and it's been tailored so that it does the right things and asks you for the right stuff at the right time and kind of augments this experience so that the lead ops person only has to get involved when something really is wrong. And we are making great progress in that direction, and we're doing it based on sort of standard technologies that everybody uses, but just making them more powerful.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for clearing that up. As you built this and you're continuing to build it, you've got, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong here, is it you and two other co-founders?
Just one other co-founder. It's Sebastian.
One other okay. Yeah. So two of you. And did you work together? How did you guys meet?
Yeah, he was here from Germany, working at a company based in Munich, and we met at a meetup, a technical meetup in Oakland, and I hired him, and he spent a number of years working with me at Sauce Labs, and then when I left, he led the team for a while there, and through that whole time, we became good friends and kept that connection going.
Yeah, it's always so critical. Your partner in marriage or life or business is everything. If it doesn't work, I mean, I heard the stat that 50% or maybe higher of startups that don't make it's because the partnerships don't make it. And so that's such a critical. We just had another podcast right before this, founder out of Harvard, and they had done some research about at Harvard Business School that I think 87% of startups, these numbers I think are accurate, 87% that fail had only one founder, so it was like solopreneurs fail significantly more than to have at least one other person you're building with. So it's great that you've got a co-founder and you can collaborate and solve problems together, which is, half the battle.
I can't stress that enough, to be honest with you, how important it is to have a partner in crime, because it's like such it's an emotional challenge. It's such a marathon. And one of the hardest parts is trying to manage your own psyche, right? And having someone that when they're up, and you trade off being up and down and try to level each other out. I think there's a whole podcast episode that I could easily do on the marathon of startups and founder relationships for sure.
Yeah. Well, on that note, what tooling or strategy do you use as a mental tool that helps you stay positive when you're going through challenging times in your journey of a startup? What works for you?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a huge challenge for me, I think, since the beginning of this. We're 3 years in, right? And I'd say the first year I was really, really bad at sort of keeping even keel. It's somebody says something good about it, you get really up, and somebody says something bad about it, you get really down. And you do a release and nobody likes it, and you wind up in Hacker News, and you get and so for me, it's been a lot about managing my own state of happiness and mental health, and so the more that I've understood the things that trigger me and how my anxiety works and all that kind of stuff, the better I've been able to be at this. And I feel like people don't talk about that enough. And so I find that spending time in the woods, being away from screens, is really important. I feel that playing with my kids or playing on guitar or going skiing or getting away from screens and taking my mind off the problem at hand actually is really helpful in me to understand where we're at and what I need, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. 80% of business is psychological, and I don't think that gets enough attention. The ups and the downs can be devastating depending on what side you're on that day, that week, that year. And so, yeah, there's a lot that's going on right now, a lot of research and a lot of therapeutic ways to keep your mind right as you're going through the journey. Uh, we all know as founders that, it's an up and down event and a journey. And so I think having that mindset of being able to find your own hack or solution to stay focused and stay positive is key, because it's not just how you think. Also, it's your energy kind of influences your team. They can feel what you're feeling when you're feeling good and bad, and sometimes that can rub off in a positive or negative way. So I think it's really important. Um, as you look at your company today, you've raised $5.7 million. How big is the team size, and are you local or international?
Uh, there's two of us in Berkeley. My co-founder was here, and he's in North Carolina, but we'll be back at the end of the year. So there'll be three of us here, and then we have folks in Colombia, Peru, and Nigeria. So the
International. I
total
love that.
international, right, and a handful of contractors who are also distributed all over. So in total, I think there's
Yeah,
about 13 people involved on a regular basis.
great. As you look at managing teams remotely, what's worked for you in terms of keeping the team high performing and focused?
Yeah, that's such a challenge. I think one thing we found is after the Sauce Labs days, we had some really great folks that we knew in Europe that we liked working with, and well, one of the things is basically that we sort of have taken the stance at this point that having folks that many time zones away is just not good for startups. At least for us, it's not. So trying to keep people in basically U.S. compatible time zones is really important. Um, we as founders were spread pretty thin, and so you have to do all the things, but also project management, and that means that a lot of the time you're probably not doing as good a job as you can communicating with the team what you're trying to get done, right, and keeping track of that. So we did wind up bringing a product management person in, and that's pretty recent, but that's showing a lot of really great. Um, uh, that's I would say it's smoothing out a lot of the interactions and starting us to helping us to build momentum in sort of a more consistent way. I feel like without that, you do these big sprints where everybody like dedicates all this effort to like a push, right? But after that, keeping up that cadence becomes really hard, right? So it's very spurty. So having this sort of consistent cadence, I think, is really important. And yeah, and then when you have a bad week, just to try to stay positive, right? Because this is a marathon and it's emotionally pretty challenging.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. Um, what's the opportunity or the problem that keeps you up at night in the stage you're at as a company currently?
Yeah, I think honestly, it's always about getting product market fit, right? That's in the early stage startup, that's what you lose sleep over. You build cool features, you build functionality, you try to use the right technology, you try to appeal to your target audience. And it's shocking sometimes things that you imagine are going to be hugely useful and garner excitement aren't, and other things that you do seems silly and simple, and it's the thing that makes people really love what you're building. And so for us, it's had to be all about baby steps and building stuff and talking and integrating feedback and things like that. But getting to a place where not just an open source tool that solves a problem being, adopted, it's what cloud or sort of SaaS functionality can you build that's going to feel like a natural value add, that's not going to alienate anybody, but can also lead you to a business. And yeah, I I think that will probably continue for a very long time, even after we have revenue.
Yeah, gotcha. As you look at the community of founders and you interact with other founders, um, What's one word of advice you got from another founder that you have applied or you wish you knew earlier that you could share with others? It's really been insightful.
Advice from other founders. And this is a funny topic because I've received and ignored so much incredibly good advice. All of the stuff around build things in small increments, spend more of your time having meetings with potential users, ask for introductions. You know, you're gonna get really stressed out, and you're gonna have to focus on like taking breaks to keep your motivation up. I've received a lot of great feedback from folks, but I think the point is that until you're in there, in that experience, it's really hard to like really understand it. And 3 years into a startup with all those ups and downs, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, okay, of course, having people in the same time zone is really great for productivity. Of course, you need to really focus on avoiding burnout by like building in breaks and getting away and not completely obsessing 24/7 about what you're doing, right? All that stuff, when you tell it to somebody who's not in it, it's like, yeah, of course, cry me a river, right? Like you get to live your dream, but it's so stressful, right? But when you're in it, it really is true. So I don't have a single piece, but it's all right. You just don't get it until it's happening to you.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, very cool. I'm going to ask you a few questions here. This is just, I guess 3 questions. Some call it a, lightning round. These are just 3 questions that I'm interested to know your thoughts on. Where do you go to think big or to brainstorm?
Where do I go to think big? I think I don't. It's not really for me about going anywhere. I think it's more about if I'm going to do a construction project, or I'm going to dig a hole and plant something, or I'm going to do some sort of physical manual labor. Is the place that allows me to digest the stuff that's behind the cerebral thinking. And every time I wind up doing a hike, or I'm doing a house project that involves carrying heavy stuff around, I usually end that by having some really amazing thought processes that can come back and contribute to the state of the company. So I have to force that stuff to happen.
That's great. What activity helps you best solve problems?
Yeah, I think, I think everybody's answer is probably the shower or sitting in the hot tub. Those are both really good. I think the other thing though is group discussions where a lot of perspectives that I wouldn't have myself are like able to be freely contributed, right? Like people don't need to preface with maybe this is irrelevant, but here's this interesting way of thinking. I've just always found those sort of open forums to be really helpful. And the other thing is, if Sebastian and I can get away from our screens and have a little fun, but also talk about the company in a very unstructured way, really cool stuff comes out of that, right? And I think in this remote world, it's hard to have those interactions in the way that we used to. I think that's what the primary thing I miss about offices, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's great. Um, you kind of already answered one of the questions, which was, how do you stay mentally positive during challenging times? And I think you did a pretty good job of kind of going through that. It's such an important aspect, in good and bad times, to kind of psychologically just be able to keep yourself energized and positive. So you're to me, you're doing all the right things from others we've talked to as well. I think everyone's kind of has their own way of going about it. There's no one right or wrong way, but just find a way. And
Yeah,
you hope for the best as you keep.
I would add one thing to maybe what I said. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly, but there was kind of a mantra from the CEO of Sauce Labs, which was avoid attachment to outcome. And I think if you combine uh, that concept of anything could happen, there's nothing you can do about it. All you can do is focus on doing great stuff today, and you combine that with, we're so lucky to be able to get to do what we do. You've got people to give you money to build cool things and be creative. How amazing is that? if you add those two things together and are able to get yourself to stay in the moment, that's it's only positive, right? I mean, in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be okay, right? Like if the company doesn't survive, like I want, that's not great, but you're learning so much in every step of what you're doing, and we're so lucky to be able to do it, that those things will yield positive things, I believe, in one way or another, ultimately.
Well said. Many people become entrepreneurs for different reasons. What's the main reason you wanted to become an entrepreneur?
It's an interesting question. Um, so I was always really happy being VP of engineering or an engineering manager, because I really liked helping other folks sort of be the best version of themselves in their job, right? And offering them that sort of moral support and encouragement, but also coaching. Um, and I feel like being a founder is like the ultimate version of that, right? If you see brilliance in people and you want to do something about it, you can go do something about it, right? You can remove blockers from those people. You can change the circumstance. You can encourage them in ways. You can, if you want to, and there's something that is in their way from being great, you can pay for that thing a lot of the time to remove the blocker to help them improve. And I think that's really satisfying for me. I also think that in a way, if you have somebody feeding you what the company should look like and what the product should be, it limits the kind of thought that you can have. And so one of the cool things is this: if you start from, we could blow this whole thing up and completely reorganize and change everything about this company. We're not going to, probably, but we could. That kind of thought process allows you to reel it back into a place where there are some things that you want to do that may not be the norm, but you think could have a powerful impact on your company. And so there's this amount of freedom and learning and experimentation that is involved in being a founder that I haven't seen in any other place in any other way. And I love that.
Yeah. The key word that I took from that is freedom. And it seems to be in line with a lot of reasons why people become entrepreneurs and founders is, you have the autonomy to make the decision, good or bad, but you also have the freedom to decide when to do things and how to do them. And so there's a lot of that's maybe not the first thing you think about, but a really good byproduct of going out and innovating and being on the hook when it doesn't work, but also being on the hook when it does work. So that's great. As you look to 2024, what's on the roadmap for Stateful?
Yeah, so we're building like crazy. Runme.dev, is in a state where it's very useful and it's very cool, but there's a lot of functionality we want to add based on sort of the patterns that we're seeing in our user base. We want to build out more around debugging and collaboration for those run books that you have. We've done some experimentation, but we want to do more into helping folks discover the run books and sort of keep the tribal knowledge that an organization has, encourage that to also be part of the code base instead of off in other wikis and things, and give developers a way to have their documentation stay part of this living code base and relevant through testing documentation. We also think there's a cool opportunity around analytics, right? You have a code base full of documentation, or many code bases full of these markdown files that turn into runbooks. How many of them are being used and by who, and what is the quality of them, and what are things that could be done to make them more powerful and useful. And so we want to sort of fill out the rest of this roadmap from discovery to quality to analytics on top of just the raw utility of building tools. And I'd love to see us come out of next year with a ton of clarity around a product that adds to the open source project in a way that companies and teams inside of companies are finding it incredibly valuable. And so we're going to be laser focused on, what are you using it for, and how do we make it better for your specific use case if you're this lead ops person? And generally speaking, just getting the word out, because we think it's a movement that's important to the developer operator community.
I love that. It's a movement. If people want to be part of the movement, if they want to find you or find your company, Stateful, or the product Runme, where do they go?
Yeah, so Stateful is the company. It's the entity, right, that we work for that backs Runme. But most of our effort has gone into runme.dev and the open source repos on GitHub. So if you go to runme.dev, you can join us on Discord. You can join our mailing list. You can go and check out the code. And we would love to have your participation, even if it's just saying, this feature annoyed me, or if you added these two things, I would show it off to my company. We want to hear everything.
That's great. And just lastly, what are the platforms you're most on that other developers can find you on, or just in general can communicate?
Yeah, I mean, you get direct access to us if you join the Runme Discord channel. We're active on there. We're trying to put in all of our updates when we release new stuff or fix issues or whatever it is to try to get feedback. So if you want to talk to us about something there, jump on. Otherwise, log a ticket on GitHub on one of the repos, and we'll be on top of it.
Great. Adam, to you for joining. Appreciate your time. It's been a lot of fun learning about your journey, and look forward to catching up with you in the future to see where things go and the progress you make. And to all the listeners for listening, appreciate you joining. It means the world to me. My name is Jake Aaron Villarreal. I'm the host of the podcast. I look forward to catching up with you all on the next episode. Until then, take care. Before we wrap up, I want to give a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs that have joined to make this podcast possible. And for all the listeners for listening. It means the world to me that you chose to spend your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to connect with you all soon on the next episode. Take care. This show is sponsored by Match Relevant, a company that helps venture-backed startups find the best people in the market, and they do it in 3 simple steps. First, they sit down with founders to understand their story. Second, they tell their story into multiple candidate channels. And third, they schedule interviews within 48 hours. Find us at matchrelevant.com to learn more about how we do it.